Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 9th of January 2025 and these are the stories that we'll try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the reforms in the FBR in the tax system in Pakistan. Now, there have been many a times when these reforms, whether they be administrative or policy or organizational, have been proposed but not properly implemented in letter and spirit in the past. Now the government is serious in implementing them and in modernizing the whole FBR and the tax system in Pakistan. We will be discussing different aspects of that in our very first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Russia-Ukraine conflict that has now entered its 1050th day. Today a lot has been happening, whether on the conflict front, whether on the diplomatic front, or whether on the future of this whole conflict as well, with the new government about to take oath on the 20th of January. And it seems that a lot might change post the 20th of this very month. This is going to be our second segment. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns polio, and the number of cases in Pakistan has now increased to 69 because a new case has been discovered in a tank in January. Now, Pakistan and Afghanistan remain the only two countries that have polio cases, and let's hope that this year 2025 becomes the year when we become polio free. Then Egypt has unveiled archaeological wonders in Luxor. Wonders that belong to past queens and past kings, and of course the leisure and the beauty of the past as far as the Egyptian pyramids, the Egyptian pharaohs is known to all. So this adds to that beauty of the Egyptian rich past. Finally, the death anniversary of Sultan Rahi is being observed today. Sultan Rahi, as we all know, was an icon as far as Punjabi cinema is concerned and continues to remain so to this day as well. We observe his death anniversary today. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the reforms in the FBR and the tax system. We've been joined by Dr. Nasir Iqbal. He's a senior economist at PITE. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us, and it has been a long time coming. It's interesting because a lot of things are issues that we have discussed in the past when we have discussed economy as well. But let's move without further ado. 2001, there were reforms that were introduced as far as tax or the FBR is concerned, that were administrative in nature, that were policy reforms, or that were organizational reforms as well. Q to 2025, how much of those reforms that we used to talk about way back then and have been talking about since are still relevant today? Have they been updated? Has the fact that a lot of modernization has come in the whole system in different countries across the world will also be applied this year in Pakistan?
Yeah, thank you so much for discussing very important topic. You know, the IMF is concerned with the tax system and the tax rate, and the government of Pakistan, as you mentioned in your question, that the Pakistan is also looking for a reforms in tax structure, tax administration, and the way tax policies are framed. You know, the proposal that splitting the entity into where there is a different setup, one for the tax collection and the other for the tax policy formally. I think it's a very welcome step. You know what, we did a research that what kind of infrastructure really we are looking for. The first and the foremost reform that we really have to look is the human-less setup. To me, the human-less setup means when there is an interaction between the FBR or the tax collection authority and the end user, there would be no need of any human interaction, either by the agent, either by the tax collector, either by the tax inspector. So that will give a confidence to the both sides, not only to the end user, but also the FBR, the other tax collector system, that they believe on tax system. And globally, if you look into the way how the developed world believe on online transaction, online system, and also the service delivery that they have, you know, they have the trust on that system. So we have to focus on that. And of course, this is a very welcome step by the government, that they are willing to take a very bold decision to reform this FBR, To what extent they will be succeeded, that would be will tell us the future. And if they are willing and they have the will, only that can lead to some sort of a deep reform. If we are only looking for the superficial reform, like let's see, making some small changes within the system and appointing a new bureaucratic structure above the way that these institutions are designed, it will not work. We have to create a
I
system
agree
where
with you on that, but Nasir Saab, I'd like to understand something. You talked about modernization and how Pakistan is also moving towards that. I'd just like to refer to, I think you must be also referring to the faceless custom, the modernization as far as the customs is concerned that has been inaugurated by our Prime Minister. And the faceless customs assessment system seems to be a very good idea, because as you yourself have pointed out, that it will lead to less of issues pertaining to systems such as the FBR, and more transparency and more of a robust system as far as the FBR or the tax system is concerned. But I'd like to understand something. Now, Prime Minister, while inaugurating this faceless customs system yesterday, talks about reforms of the tax system again, something that we've been discussing in various shows in the past as well. He says that he plans to reduce tax rates and introduce measures to prevent tax theft by revising the tax slabs. He says the finance minister has been addressed, he has given the task to implement a policy that incorporates penalties and rewards for tax recovery. These 3 points, are they implementable, and if so, what is the modality so that they are properly implemented?
I think so. If one of you and the government authority would read our tax reform template or the tax reform commission report, we mentioned all these three things. We are in favor of reducing the tax rate. We are in favor of reducing these tax slabs, and we are in favor of making this tax as a technology-based tax collection. We have calculated all these things. If we really reduce the tax rate, what happened? If we reduce the tax slabs, what happened? And we come up with a calculation that give either the similar tax collection or even the higher tax collection. It was very strange for the common people or for the policy maker how it happened. It will happen because if when you have a less or the reasonable tax slabs, a reasonable tax rate, it will substantially reduce the leakages within the system, because now you have a less incentive to cheat the system, rather than it is like a relatively more incentivized thing to pay the taxes. Currently, if you are demanding very high tax rate with a lot of hurdle by the administration, then probably the best part for end user to avoid taxation. So if we're really looking for a system that will give like a concept of equity, transparency, and the progressiveness in the taxation system, we have to revisit the entire structure of our taxation system from both ends. One is from policy end, and the other is from the administration end. We have to introduce a package of reforms. Let me make it once again. We have to reduce a package of reforms rather than only focusing the one node of the system, then sticking with another node of the system. It will not work. We need a complete overhaul of the system. We have to make it just like, look at the banking difference between the national bank and the alpha bank. You can find the difference. Both have the same kind of nature of work, but both are performing totally differently. Look at the satisfaction level of the consumer while visiting national bank as well as the alpha bank, yeah, any other private bank. Why they are so confident? Why they are ready to pay higher charges at the private bank? Because they are giving the best services. They are facilitating. There is no fear that you would be cheated, you would be asked, anything like that. If we create such type of tax system, it's not difficult. Let me make it very clear. It's not difficult. For that, we only need a will, and this time I assume government have some kind of will to go for these reforms. Let's make a package deal, and maybe we will be happy to share our document once again, and maybe we can update it to provide a mechanism for these reforms. And we can also suggest what what is the possible reduction in these tax slabs, in these tax rate, to increase the tax revenue, not to maintain but to increase the tax revenue. We also propose a lot of reforms in custom duties, in regulatory duties. Why? Because we believe if we reduce them, we will encourage trade. And if there is a further trade, there is a possibility of growth. Currently, we are under the umbrella of this IMF. Growth would be very difficult. We have to
Under
create
the
the
IMF, Nasir Saab, under the IMF, it is being said that a tax to GDP ratio has been set at 10%. Can this change? What measures in the under the umbrella of the FBR or tax reforms could Pakistan make in order to change this expectation from the IMF?
the IMF is looking for a target. Their target, for example, if their target is like a 10% of the GDP. Okay, we also require that much amount of taxation. And now we have to look into the space where space is available. On the tax expenditure, we are almost giving exemption of 5 trillion. Similarly, on the leakages side, we have a lot of leakages. Let me quote one thing that highlighted by the Prime Minister in their current speech, that 400 billion are leakages in the custom system. So even these small amount on the one hand would make a lot of difference on the both sides. One is the overall tax collection and also increasing the tax base. These are the two fundamental things that IMF is looking for. IMF is not looking for your tax rate. They only bind you because if you reduce further tax rate and you can't increase your tax base and you can't expand and you can't reduce the liquidity, probably it will reduce the overall tax collection. That's what happened in this year. We wrongly projected that our tax growth would be around more than 30%, but it didn't happen. So we have to think our out of box solution to ensure that we have to meet the minimum tax collection. So for that, we're really looking for the reform that would come in a package form. It will completely change the structure. You have to reduce the influence of bureaucrat within that structure. You have to ensure a fair and competitive environment to the end user, that they feel empowered that this is tax for us, we have to pay, and the system is very fair. Whatever we have to pay, it will be counted in the government national account. So that would be the way forward.
All right. I'd also like to, highlight, now that we are talking of reforms, of the budget 2025-2026, the FBR has initiated consultations with key stakeholders to finalize proposals for this budget. And there are some very interesting proposals that they have put forward. And their priorities that include phasing out tax exemptions, expanding the tax net, supporting domestic industry, and tax polity equity, that is measures to ensure progressive taxation and reduce inequalities in tax treatment across these sectors. They have also requested for suggestions for reforms in the income tax, in the sales tax, and in the customs. Is it something that is very easy, or is it something that is difficult to undergo? Or do you all, in your point of view, all we need is just implementation? Is that it? Strict compliance? Or is there more to it?
I think there are two ways, two things that they have to do. The wish list that they propose is one kind of wish list that we also proposed in the last year when they were making the budget, that these are the areas that really give you a very quick return. Like as you said, we have to look into the tax expenditure, we have to look into these tax exemption, why we are paying so much money or so much expenditure to these things. Then of course the rationalization of different tax rate, either on the sale tax, on the income tax, on the custom duty. Yes, we have to do that. For that, I said we have to create a system of confidence. That is only where we are lacking. If the government really is, they will make it a very like a bold statement and make it public. Look, from now to onward, for next entire year, this would be our tax rate. This would be the exemption that we are giving to very specific sector due owing to these reasons. There would be no further exemption by any means. Then there is a removal of bureaucratic hurdle or the bureaucratic threat created by the tax inspector. And the last thing that we have to create a policy of strict compliance. There would be no negotiation on the compliance. Either it's like a rich person, either it's a poor person, whosoever is come under the minimum threshold to pay a tax should be part of this tax net. There should be no exemption on that, and that would be the key thing if we really want to expand the tax base. It was good gesture by the government that they are trying to abolish this term of filer versus non-filer, because that ultimately give a legal protection to those people to avoid taxation. So we really have to create a uniform system that, like you say, that consider everyone an equal person of this Pakistan and give equal use a equal stick to measure everything. And then there is a system of rewards. Of course, there are areas where you have to put reward. Those should be considered as a reward, not as an exemption. If you perform well, like for example, if industry meet the minimum threshold of the tax and they are growing very well, you can give some sort of reward to them. Look, in the first 3 quarters you perform very well. The last quarter we will give you some kind of rewards. That would be create a win-win situation, not only for the business community, also for the government sector. And for that, we have to once again, the key criteria is to make this reform as a complete package. Don't play with these entities on the name of reforms, just changing the head from one person to another person. If you do that, it will not solve your problem by any way.
I agree with you on that. Nasir Saab, also, how interrelated is the ease of doing business, tax anomalies, addressing tax anomalies, enhancing transparency, compliance, strict compliance, equity in taxation, and tax exemptions that we've talked about? How are all of these measures interrelated as far as tax reforms or FBR reforms is concerned?
Yeah, I think these are interconnected. From where we have to collect tax from the business. If you are looking for the salaried person, those are already paying tax at the source. So there is no role of the FBR in terms of collecting tax from the salaried person. The only way is that we have to collect tax from these business communities and the businesses and something like that. For that, yes, if we give them ease of doing business, that is linked with the one of the transformation of this FBR. The reforms in FBR also provide a kind of ease of doing business, because that will help them to expand business. And the tax collection currently, we are relying on the inflationary component of the tax growth. Normally, every year we only add just 4 to 5% due to various reforms, what we call a policy reforms, what we call any additional measure and net expanding. But the rest 95% is linked with the inflation. It means that is only a nominal growth in your tax. It's not a real growth. The real growth would come from these reforms. If we have to give them a weight of, let's say, 30%, the next years, the growth in tax would come from these reforms. And the reforms would ultimately translate it into the business expansion. If there is no business expansion due to your reforms, then probably you end up with the same level of collection. So ease of doing business is critical component, and the removing tax hurdle is one of the part of that. Then the other is on the business side, we have to address the contract related issues where there is a lot of legalities are involved, and there is a very pathetic processes and very lengthy processes that undermine the incentive as well as the motivation of the business people. So we have to substantially work on those. Maybe just like that, we have created a differentiated law for some other component. Why not we can create a differentiated law for the business community? And we can provide them delivery. Anybody can do any business. Let me make it a very clear. I just wrote an op-ed where I try to sell the idea that if of anyone to establish a business, just ask them to fill a form on his or her mobile, a very simple one-pager form with only two documents. One is your CNAC, other is valid bank account. If he or she provides these two documents, let him or her to work. Then there is a like if there is any violation of law, there are other authorities that can play their own role to control those kind of violation. But let them to work. Currently, we need a like plenty of NOCs, documentation. Why we are looking for those type of hurdle? And on the name of ease of doing business, we are doing nothing. We are just trying to create a like a changing like a one notion to another notion, where one is create another hurdle. We have to completely remove all kind of restriction, and then there is a strict vigilance at a very institutional level, not at an individual level. If you again allow the individual to make a vigilance, it will create again the same circle of corruption and the leakages.
All right. I'd like to understand something. You talked a little bit, you alluded a little bit at the very beginning of our conversation to two revenue collection bodies, the Customs and Inland Revenue Service, otherwise known as the IRS. The Prime Minister has approved the separation of these two entities, and this is supposed to happen by the 31st of March this year. How important is this step? How do you view this step? Is this step part of that package deal that you have been talking about?
I think it's again a fragmented approach. To be honest, it's again a fragmented approach because we didn't methodologically analyze what happened with the custom department, what happened with the inland revenue department, what happened with the overall FBR structure. So we need like what I call is the complete package where we try to identify what role specifically this department play, how the other department look at the PRAL. PRAL is like established in FBR, but it's not functional. So if we even separate these two departments and putting the head on the each department, and they come up with the same type of policy framework, because then there is execution plan. You know that like changing the name, dividing one department into two departments may not solve the entire problem. To solve the problem, we have to look in. Maybe we even don't need like a very superficial, a large body. Now it's a era of digitization. You know that the entire income tax is collected at the source. Why there is a very large FBR? So we have to rationalize each thing and come up with the package where we have to identify what are our needs, how we can manage, how we can address, how we can materialize all kind of activities with the minimum human interface. That would be the key word. With the minimum human interaction, we have to ensure this smooth transaction of every kind. Look at the example of this faceless interaction. It happened all over the world, and unfortunately, there is some news that the transit trade with Afghan, we are moving again toward the physical inspection of the goods and services. It substantially increased the time, and also allow the personnel, those are working over there, to exploit and create rents within that system. So on the one hand, we try to reform and to try to digitize. On the other hand, we are creating another system. So creating a new body may not be a solution, and it's very common approach in the government to create an authority, to create a company, to create something like that. But let's be on. First of all, to me, we have to understand what are the challenges, whether that could be resolved through splitting into two component, or it could be resolved within the existing framework. What
There are so
kind
many
of
things, Nasir Saab, because I understand from your discussion and your point of view also that we need a very simplistic approach, but an approach that is consistent, an approach that continues with every government that comes in the future as well, so that for the next 5, 10, 15 years, we have a continuity of policies that are stringent, that are simple, but at the same time faceless, and move towards our economy moving in the right direction. Steps are right, but their implementation needs to be done, as you have pointed out, in a proper robust mechanism. Thank you very much, Nasir Iqbal Saab, senior economist with PI, to have joined us. Thank you again to have given us your valid and valuable input as far as these tax and FBR reforms are concerned. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We haven't touched this issue since a very, very long time, and I thought it was a high time we did highlight what has been going on as far as this conflict is concerned. So we got hold of two interesting guests to discuss that and more. Let me introduce them to you. No one is a stranger to my viewers. On my very right is Dr. Amna Mahmood. She's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Saiba, to have joined us. And then is Syed Muhammad Hassan Raza, who's a political history researcher who we met last time. And let's continue without further ado, because we have lots to discuss. Dr. Saiba, bomb attacks from the Russian side, attacks from the Ukrainian side. The US-based think tank says that Russian forces occupy 71% of one of the towns, and this has been going on since the last 1,000 days, 1,050 days. We have been seeing both the sides either try to occupy one area or the other area. What is the ultimate aim, let's put it that way, of both the sides, whether it be Russia or Ukraine, and how can this conflict come to an end apart from the US intervention?
US intervention is already there, so it is better to avoid for Ukrainians especially. Thank you very much, Omar, for having a very generous introduction. We are always here for discussion, and this is very pertinent to the coming global trends, especially after joining Mr. Trump inaugural in his office. But I perceive that at this time, at this very juncture, keeping the whole history intact, Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty, its territorial integrity, and rather we can better call it defense of its land. While Russia is defending its position as the regional power, superpower, emerging superpower, and they wanted to keep US and its allies away from its immediate borders, and that's why they are defending. The robust change in the current situation and recent attacks, that shows that since Russia is free from Middle East, and that is done by Mr. Biden's administration, that they ended the role of Russia in Middle East for the time being, and Russia is concentrating to gain more and more. Rather, they have reclaimed more than 2,000 kilometers of their area back from Ukraine, and now they are, as you just mentioned, 70% of Ukraine under their possession, and that is going to change the status of Ukraine from a sovereign state to a tiny entity. That is just to make US realize to come to negotiation table, otherwise there is no solution other
because
than
Dr. Amna, if you
Ukraine
remember,
would be
we have discussed years back, because this is a conflict that has been going on for a couple of years now. We had discussed, you remember, China in the very first few months had intervened and wanted to come wanted both the sides to come to the negotiating table. They came to the negotiating table, but nothing happened. Do you feel this time something tangible could happen?
I think that Mr. Trump, as he is showing some signs of appeasement and cooperation, recently he invited the Chinese president in his inaugural ceremony, and before that you have learned that he was again and again saying that there would be trade sanctions against China. But since this good gesture shows that he wanted to have good will with China to bring Russia to the negotiation table, because right now Russia and China are in alliance with each other. They are working together, not only in SCO, BRICS, and in all the initiative of the regional nature. So I think Mr. Trump wanted to appease China to bring Russia on the negotiation table, which is inevitable for United States right now.
All right, Hassan, let's come to you. The US tells the United Nations Security Council that North Korea is significantly benefiting from its troops fighting alongside Russia in Ukraine, gaining experience which makes Pyongyang more capable of waging war against its neighbors. What I'd like to understand from all of this statement is, does the Ukraine-Russia conflict have more regional dimensions than previously thought?
Yes, of course. North Korean troops, they are fighting alongside the Russians against Ukraine, and this can result in their troops gaining valuable war experience, and also there would be an exchange of military technology between Russia and North Korea. We have a view that North Korean military technology is a bit backward and it's not up to date with the Western powers. But when there's an alliance between their army and the Russian army, so there could be a valuable exchange of information, of technology, of warfare skills and tactics, which the North Koreans can benefit from to raise their military capacity. And on the flip side, they can use all that experience they have gained in this war with their eternal nemesis, South Korea. So this is one angle through which we can say that the conflict can drag into another continent and into another region.
All right. Dr. Amna, I love to talk about the US and this whole conflict and how things might change post the 20th of January. Now, the US is ready to provide, I mean, this is the latest, the US is ready to provide Ukraine with an additional $500 million in weapons. This has been confirmed by two senior US officials ahead of Donald Trump taking oath on the 20th. Now, the US leadership on Ukraine, a lot of people are saying, is critical, and continued assistance for Kiev is key. Will this aid continue in the new regime?
I don't think so. There cannot be immediate halt. Those sanctions or those already approved by the Congress, that would be in pipeline, and that would continue. And these are actually the sovereign commitments of American government to Ukrainian people and the government. But I think the pace as it was going previously, that would be reduced. Similarly, you see that as Hassan mentioned, that this is going to be more of regional nature rather than the global, because on global stage there are a number of other conflicts arising. So I think that the Europe is not ready to continue it anymore. As you see the response of Slovakia, Poland and other countries, they are deprived of, even the Russian themselves, Crimean themselves, because they think that since Ukraine was the grain house of Europe, and now the food price is very high all over the Europe, including in Russia. So I think that US is also thinking, without the support of the NATO countries, Mr. Trump cannot alienate them. So apart from this, he announced that he would go bilateral with the Putin directly. That have already alienated the NATO and European Union countries. But at the same time, I think they would take the sigh of relief if US will reach some solution with Russia on this point, because it is actually the US who instigated all that. By the way, I may have mentioned sometime, I was in US, in Michigan State University, and the rep from there, she was instrumental in getting approved the first consignment of weapons to, and she came to our university, Michigan State University, and then she asserted that why she is doing, we are actually defending capitalist world, the free world, and as they their slogans.
I understand.
So I think that the pace of weapon supply would be very low in during the period of.
But
Mr.
there will
Trump.
be a continued use.
But that would continue, because it would be the bargaining chip on the table.
Understood. One thing that has been very important to Ukraine is NATO membership, Hassan. This has been its key goal from day one. It has time and again during this conflict as well, during these 1051 days, asked to become a member of NATO. Now, also it has the Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says that the country is ready to replace Hungary in the European Union and NATO if Budapest prefers to sign and join the Russian-led blocs. Do you feel this is this could be a possibility, because there have been a lot of reservations as far as Ukraine's joining of NATO is concerned? Could that change?
In the near future, I believe these are just empty slogans. These are hollow sounds and saber rattling that the EU is doing with Russia. In the past, we have seen that EU membership does not come overnight. It takes decades. And if EU decides to extend its membership to Ukraine, so at least it is going to take 5 years, half a decade, for Ukraine to become a member of the EU. But this is not going to solve any problems. The whole excuse that Russia put up for waging this war against Ukraine was that during the Reagan and Gorbachev negotiations, when Ukraine was becoming an independent country, during 1990 and 1991, it was decided that Ukraine is not going to become part of any pro-Western coalitions, and that's how Gorbachev agreed to the unification of Germany, and it was agreed that NATO is not going to advance 1 inch from Germany towards the east, towards the Eastern Europe. So these guarantees were violated, and which resulted in this war, sadly, in this day. And EU membership, as I said, is not a possibility in the near future, at least.
What about NATO?
NATO membership, no, NATO would not like to drag itself into this conflict and in direct confrontation with Russia, because this could lead to an escalation of the war and can create a global humanitarian crisis. So that too is not a possibility.
All right. Dr. Amna, a lot of developments are also happening. US Secretary of State says any future deal to end the war in Ukraine would need to build into it the necessary deterrence to prevent Russia to attack Ukraine again. Then Zelensky, who is going to attend a defense meeting of Kiev's allies that is being hosted by the US, sorry, at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany. So it's in Germany, but it is being hosted by US. UK Prime Minister Starmer is going to meet with the French President, where illegal immigration and support for Ukraine are also going to be likely up for topics. Then I add to it, because there's a lot of development, Finnish President is going to host a summit in Helsinki for NATO countries that border the Baltic Sea, in which the issue of Ukraine is also going to be brought up. How do you view these developments, to say the least? Do you feel that the tilt is moving in Ukraine's favor, in Russia's favor, or is it balanced for the moment?
I think right now the tilt is in favor of Russia, because you know, every army has to fight its own war, and that is the case in Ukraine as well. The whole Europe, NATO countries and US, they are giving them support, logistics, weapon and everything, diplomatic support as well. But it is the army of Ukraine that is in the battlefield. And you know, you see that they are having a remarkable deserter rate. And deserter rate is very high. It means that they don't want to fight, and they know that this is a futile war that would never be ended, and if that would be ended, that would end with the existence of Ukraine itself. That would be eradicated. So I think that it would be very difficult for Ukraine to keep that way. Secondly, you have pointed out that there is a summit on illegal migration, and the whole neighboring countries of Ukraine are apprehensive about this element.
Exactly.
And since they are also facing themselves the acute crisis of energy crisis, that is raising their food prices and all cost of life. So I think that they are also apprehensive that it would be stopped. So if all supporters would agree, and Mr. Trump also conclude that, and some amicable solution come, then that can guarantee the Ukrainian existence on the map of the world. Otherwise, it would be swallowed by Russia. And it's a fact, whenever Russia swallow the neighboring countries, Crimea like and others, there is no way to get them back, and then there is no UN Security Council writ on Russia, because power is the only solution, as you see in case of Israel and Gazan war. So I think that the tilt is going in favor of Russia, because Russia in a stronger position, and that's why they are asserting in the battlefield. You see that the surge with the rise of this 2025 surge in attacks on Ukraine directly, and they have recovered most of the areas. They have destroyed number of the ports, seaports, and the airports, and equipment and weapons, and at the same time they have destroyed the food reserves. That is only rescue for the armies fighting, and it's very critical.
That is true. Before I come to the humanitarian crisis also in Ukraine, I'd like to understand the whole gas crisis that has also engulfed this area. Dr. Amna had alluded a little bit about it. EU foreign policy chief accuses Russia of using its supply of natural gas as a weapon and waging a hybrid war on Moldova, where the breakaway region has been without Russian gas since the 1st of January. Slovakia's Prime Minister also says he has secured a gas supply for Slovakia during a visit with the Russian PM. What is the whole background of this gas crisis? Is Russia really taking advantage of the flow or lack of it thereof to different countries, and what is the solution?
So let's start with Germany, the largest industrial country in the EU and all of Europe. 70% of Germany relies on Russian gas, and I remember back in 2022 when this war first started, in Scotland the price of gas doubled overnight, almost overnight. And as a result, many people suffered, and especially people from vulnerable groups of the society, women, older people, children, they were all suffering, and they had no heating in their homes. Right now, in the breakaway region of Moldova, Transnistria, over there, Transnistria has been without gas and heating since the 1st of January, and it's been a week, and temperatures have dropped below freezing point over there right now. This can be used as a bargaining chip with the EU, but then again, Ukraine is also blocking Russian gas pipelines which are flowing into the European Union. So as a result, Ukraine is trying to put pressure on the European countries to garner support for its cause in the war. But from my personal experience, I've spoken to a few Ukrainians, and they're all sick of this war, and they want it to end as soon as possible. And same goes for Russians. There was warmongering spirit over there, perhaps early on in the conflict. But right now, since there have been attacks on civilians and there's been collateral damage, as we have seen that an Azerbaijani plane was attacked. Now we don't know whether it was a Russian drone or a Ukrainian drone, but it crashed, and it crashed into Russian airspace. So civilian population is getting hurt. There has been an attack in Kazan on a civilian residential building. There were a few casualties over there as well. So we are seeing that the war is not limited to just military targets. It's being expanded to civilian targets as well. And that is where the danger lies.
And that is why the UN also says that there is a humanitarian crisis that is brewing as far as the whole region is concerned. Thank you very much, Dr. Amna, Mahmood. Thank you very much, Hassan, to have come all the way to the studios. To the both of you, a huge bundle of thanks to have come and to have discussed this issue, which I think we don't talk much about, but we need to, because when it comes to global strategic policies or economic policies, everything is intertwined, and so is this crisis. The sooner it gets resolved, the sooner we can move in a right direction. Thank you very much. Please stay with us for about 2 minutes till I end the show. Last three stories, ladies and gentlemen. The first concerns polio cases. A new polio case has been unearthed in Tank in Pakistan, and that makes a total number of polio cases to 69. Now, Pakistan and Afghanistan are the only two countries in the world that are now seeing these polio cases. The fact is that despite so many programs that Pakistan has initiated and will initiate also in this year as well, there are still the number of cases of polio that keep on increasing. We maybe need to go to the whole background on where and how they come from. Do they come from Afghanistan, or is there any other source, and need to nip it in the bud. Let's hope this happens and Pakistan is declared polio free in 2025. Egypt has unveiled an archaeological wonder in Luxor. Now, Egypt showed these new archaeological discoveries, including the 4,000-year-old tombs of high-ranking officials and artwork from the times of Queen Hatshepsut at an ancient necropolis in the famed city of Luxor. Whosoever is interested in architecture, we've all grown up, people talking about the pyramids and the beauty of the Egyptian pharaohs and all the architecture that was present in that era, and this just adds to the beauty of those times and how interesting from an architectural point of view or from historical point of view these new discoveries are as well. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, today is also the death anniversary of Sultan Rahi. Whosoever doesn't know Sultan Rahi, a Gen Z or maybe a millennial, but the fact is that Sultan Rahi has had a very profound impact on Pakistanis and on Pakistani society. He is the Pakistani original angry young man, and he has been part of the Punjabi culture through the different Punjabi films that were extremely huge hits in the 80s and in the 90s as well. His film career began in 1959 as a guest actor in film Baghi. He rose to tremendous fame after the release of Maulajat in 1970s. He received 2 Nigar Awards for his work in Babul and Bashira. He passed away on this very day in Gujranwala. We remember him, and our deepest condolences continue to go, and our prayers continue to go to his family. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories, segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.